With the success of R&B and funk bands of the 70s like Kool and the Gang, Earth, Wind and Fire, and even the Isley Brothers, just to name a few, the 1970s was like an open range for bands, whether the genre was funk, R&B, rock and roll, or even disco. If you could play your own instruments, write a few songs, and hold a tune, you could end up with a record deal. This came with one problem. You had a lot of bands that didn't seem to make an impact. They are what we call one-hit wonders. But the ones that did make an impact with legitimate hits fell off so quickly, and it makes you wonder why. This video is about the three bands I felt could have made supergroup status but somehow fell short. Brick was an Atlanta-based band that started in the early 70s but didn't start turning out hits until around 1976. This band had two #1 albums back to back. The band was formed by Reggie Hargis, who brought together two genres of music, disco and jazz, and created his own genre called Dazz music. Their first #1 album, Good High, was released in 1976 with the #1 hit Dazz. Now, this song was a smash, a solid song that was well put together. The second album, which went to #1 in 1977, was named after the band, with another smash hit that went to #2 on the charts called Doozik, and Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody, which went to #7 but should have gone to #1. I like the second album even better than the first. This was an excellent band. If you listen to the first two albums, they were on their way to supergroup status. Unfortunately, this is where the hits ended. They collaborated with Ray Parker Jr. on their fifth album, Summer Heat, with the song Sweat Till You Get Wet, which made it to #10 on the R&B charts. Now, there's no denying Ray Parker Jr.'s talent, but once he left radio, anybody who knew anything about his music knew he was aiming for the pop and rock audience. Maybe he should have suggested that to this band. This song has an 80s sound, but as a producer, I would have been looking at what Kool and the Gang had going on over there. That band went through several genres of music before they had their biggest success performing pop music. Now, this band was qualified to do the same. Their music just got lost in that transition into the 80s. The band recorded 7 albums and stopped recording in 1988. Mass Production was a Virginia-based band. I get a little sentimental when looking back on this band. Now, the few people that I talk with about music always say that they were a one-hit wonder, but they weren't. They had a few mild hits. Some states got music later than others, and smaller states didn't get certain music at all. Of course, now, this was before cable television. The first time I heard the song Firecracker, I was in Detroit with my family visiting relatives, and they were playing that song and Rick James' song Cold Blooded on the radio. I just graduated from grammar school, so I collected graduation money from my relatives. When we made it back to Chicago, I was going to buy those two songs. I went to 2 record stores, and they didn't even know what I was talking about. Those 2 songs dropped about a week or 2 later in Chicago. Firecracker was a hit and made it to #4 on the R&B charts. I had 3 issues with this band. First, they didn't need a female singer. That was just my opinion. And second, they didn't have a distinctive sound. When Earth, Wind and Fire sing, you know who they were. The same with the band Slave, but not this band. Some songs you would have to say, who is that? Third, they looked good and sound good, but they couldn't get the hits to put them where they should have been, and that's supergroup status. They recorded 8 albums together before they called it quits. The Fatback Band is a New York-based band that merges the New Orleans jazz sound with funk music. In the early 70s, a lot of these bands dabbled in jazz in the beginning. Now, I thought this music was just instrumental. I had no idea it was jazz. This band was my personal favorite out of the other two bands. It was a couple of strange things about this band. They recorded for close to 20 years. Now, I had no idea the other two bands recorded as long as they did, but I did know that this band was still recording. One strange thing about this band was that they never quite showed up on the charts like they should have because they had hits. They started to cook around the later part of the 70s with the hit I Like the Girls, and it only made it to number 9. That song was on heavy rotation, and so was their 1980 hit Backstroke, which only made it to number 3, and it should have been number 1. I think the problem was that this band got mixed up with the mid-70s bands like Midnight Star and Atlantic Star, and I feel like they took their shine, most definitely through the 1980s. Another odd thing is that two members of the band, Johnny Flippin and Michael Walker, wrote the song I Found Loving in 1983. Now, the song didn't make much impact, but it was re-recorded in 1987, and it did nothing again. Now, this song is beautiful, and it's a shame that it didn't become number 1 and stay there for a while. It's over 40 years old, and it does not have a dated sound. If it was played in the 90s, you would think that it was recorded in the 90s. Same with the 2000s. I listen to music from the 70s and 80s and play it daily, and it sounds like it come from that era. But this song doesn't. As you all know, Lauryn Hill lucked up and made a whole album that way, her only album. For them to make a song like that in the loud 80s was very rare. I really hate that this band didn't become more successful as it should have. And that's my pick, you guys, for the 3 bands that had potential to become supergroup status. As always, thank you so much for watching the video.